Good day. My name is Anthony Patch, and this is Pulse. Today is the 25th of July of 2024, and this very brief review for you is entitled Warfare. Last night in our 2-hour live stream at anthonypatch.com, we did a deep dive into this very subject, but I would like to briefly present the highlights to you today. I'd like to speak a little bit about some of the statements made by Benjamin Netanyahu as he addressed Congress, and also something about the UN and the International Court that perhaps you haven't heard in other news venues that I'd like to share with you, and then a little bit of a comment about Ukraine, the status of what is going on there as I see it from a big picture perspective. So beginning with statements made by Benjamin Netanyahu to Congress, I would like to highlight one excerpt from all of this. He stated that the United States and Israel have produced the most advanced weapons system on the planet. And he repeated, for emphasis, the most advanced weapons system on the planet. Followed by his words, I choose my words carefully. Something that we have commented on for many years here is that when you have a political leader, when you have an economic leader, a corporate leader, you have a spokesperson for science, they choose their words very carefully and very specifically. As I interpret advanced weapons, the most advanced weapons on the planet, I translate that, I read between the lines, as the most advanced nuclear weapons on the planet. In previous Pulse videos, I have indicated my expectations on the part of Israel, which I'll very briefly review here. I would encourage you to watch my previous videos. But I do expect Israel to utilize tactical nukes against Hezbollah, and I think now that he has, Benjamin Netanyahu has received, really, I could think quite literally, permission from Congress to declare war. And as I shared in last night's live stream, the President of the United States has to go to Congress, and Congress needs to vote and approve a declaration of war. Now, based on the influence, the financial influence of Israel with respect to our Congress, our president, this present administration, and this has happened for many previous administrations and will continue in the foreseeable future. But nonetheless, I would present it this way. Rather than President Biden addressing Congress and seeking votes to approve a declaration of war, this time not Ukraine, but the Middle East, specifically Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and more importantly, Iran. And Iran, you are now talking about, if you're targeting Iran, you're targeting Russia. So we come full circle. Rather than Biden appearing before Congress, we have Benjamin Netanyahu. It's as if Netanyahu were seeking approval from Congress to declare war. That's how I read it. Again, based upon the financial influence of Israel over the United States. And when I say financial, I mean campaign finance for our representatives in government. And therefore, the reason and the timing for his address before Congress was he is about to strike those targets. Now, there was not a formal vote, but there were some 58 standing ovations. It's as if there were a verbal vote taking place on the part of Congress. My expectation is that in short order, maybe in the next few days, Netanyahu is going to strike Hezbollah. And again, I'll say it right up front, I expect them to use their most advanced weapons against Hezbollah, not Hamas. That will continue to be a conventional kinetic war with Hamas. But striking Hezbollah and Yemen, specifically the Houthis, with these advanced weapons, and concurrently, because it needs to be concurrent, Iran, and targets in Iraq, and Syria, perhaps even Turkey. And this draws Russia in. So I may as well jump over to Ukraine and just say this briefly. The tempo of warfare in Ukraine is de-escalating. The tempo is slowing. Now, I won't do a deep dive here as to why I see it that way and what the causes are, thus the effects. But overall, just briefly, this frees up Russia to pay military attention to Israel because there is a mutual defense pact between Russia and Iran. It doesn't escape Moscow that Israel's full intention, the IDF intention, Benjamin Netanyahu's intention, is to target Iran with these advanced weapons. Thus, Russia will come immediately, concurrently. These are events that are unfolding concurrently. I mean, in a matter of minutes. Russia will come to the aid of Iran by striking Israel. So the timing of the de-escalation in Ukraine on the part of Russia now diverts their resources over to Israel. Again, the timing of the address before Congress coinciding with this reduced tempo of warfare in Ukraine. I have painted a picture in the previous pulses of Netanyahu being painted into a corner, that he's under tremendous pressure from a number of directions. Political, economic, internally in Israel, certainly the global political pressure that he is under, the existential threats as Netanyahu describes the threats from Hezbollah, continuing the Gaza events, the genocide on the part of Israel, genocide against Hamas. And this is something that is coming from the world governments, the UN, and I'll address that in just a moment, the genocide. But certainly striking Hezbollah and the Houthis. Therefore, the pressure he's under comes from the political pressure, domestically and internationally, economic pressure, pressure from the United States, those in the United States in the government that are opposed to Israel, and certainly the pressure that's coming from Hezbollah itself and really Iran. So being backed into the corner, painted into a corner as I see it, he's desperate. He understands that there's no turning back. There's no reversing course. There is no ceasefire. There's no peace accord In other words, the threats as he perceives them, those may be responses in response to Israel's threats. Either way, the threats exist, no matter who is initiating those threats. The pressure he feels is that there are now over 5,000 missiles and rockets and drones in southern Lebanon on the part of Hezbollah, supplied by Iran and Russia. And there is an escalation in the northern regions of Israel, the occupied by Hezbollah regions in Israel, in which there are continued drone and rocket attacks on Israel. Certainly, Israel is provoking a lot of this with their own military strikes in southern Lebanon. We've seen over the last week what the Houthis have been doing. So there's a lot of motivation, if you want to put it that way, for Netanyahu to go to war. And he has now received that approval from Congress, which means the United States has Israel's back. And when he made the specific point of saying, I choose my words carefully, and he includes the United States in that statement of the most advanced weapons on the planet, it is the United States that will also employ those advanced weapons in conjunction with Israel applying theirs. I'd like to talk about the International Court of Justice because Netanyahu brought this up in his address, so I would like to bring it up in this fashion. The UN Security Council has been advised, and really that's what the International Court of Justice is limited to, is providing advice and recommendations to the UN, and specifically to the UN Security Council, when the justices, the judge from the International Court of Justice issues a ruling, a finding on the part of Netanyahu, leading what is now being judged, not just called, not just referred to, but being called outright genocide on the part of Israel against Hamas in Gaza. The UN Security Council, of which the United States is a permanent member, will now vote in terms of sanctioning, along with the court finding of guilty of genocide on the part of Israel, part of Benjamin Netanyahu, sanctioning Israel and going beyond sanctioning, even if the U.S. vetoes the UN Security Council sanctioning Israel, and I'm going to go beyond just the mere sanction, that veto can be overridden by the UN. Thus, my expectation is UN peacekeeping forces, a coalition, will be formed by the UN to enter Israel itself, force a ceasefire, no matter who Israel is attacking. But certainly the emphasis will be, the primary will be, unless war breaks out on a broader scale, it will be a ceasefire between the IDF and Hamas. But I think there's not sufficient time for that assembling of a coalition peacekeeping force by the UN. I don't think there's time enough to force peace on Israel prior to Benjamin Netanyahu using these advanced weapons against his enemies, of whom I've already listed. But I wanted to give you that scenario on the part of the UN Because if I'm understanding this, certainly Benjamin Netanyahu understands it and feels that additional pressure, seeing this action by the UN looming on the horizon. Thus, he is being painted further into a corner. With the UN, they are able to enter Israel with a peacekeeping force and physically arrest Benjamin Netanyahu on the orders of the International Court of Justice and the Security Council. He fears a loss of power. He fears prosecution and incarceration. So he's bringing on war. So these are my expectations in the immediate on the part of Israel. My closing thoughts here goes back to what Benjamin Netanyahu has said in his address before Congress with respect to Iran. Now, I wasn't setting out to count how many times Netanyahu cited Iran, but if memory serves, it was approximately 5 times in this address that he cited Iran as the primary cause, as he describes Iran, as the source of all terroristic, that's the word he used, terroristic activity in the Middle East. So he brought up something from the presidency of Donald Trump, when Donald Trump brokered the Abrahamic Accord. What he is now, and he specifically brought up the Abrahamic Accord, he said that he was renaming that as the Abrahamic Alliance, and that it is his stated position and goal to bring all of the Middle Eastern countries together in this singular alliance for peace. I think that is a red herring. He knows full well that the Middle East, virtually every country, views Israel as an enemy state, and that state of Israel needs to be abolished, either through diplomatic efforts or military force. So they're really, to talk about an Abrahamic alliance is really much ado about nothing, as I view it. At any rate, those are my thoughts for today, just a brief 20-minute video here today, but I wanted to set the stage for you from a big picture perspective for what I view as an impending employment of these advanced weapons on the part of both the United States, because of Congress and their vote of approval for war to be declared by the United States, because the United States is clearly allied with Israel, and Israel is already at war with Hamas and is about to enter into a full war with Hezbollah. The Houthis, for their part, over a week ago declared they are now openly declaring war against Israel. No red lines to cross. This is according to the Houthis spokesperson. They have declared we are now declaring full and open warfare against Israel. Again, this continues to pressure Netanyahu to strike not only against the Houthis now in a much more escalated fashion, but now to take out Hezbollah. In my previous Pulse videos, I've described to you how the IDF is severely depleted. They cannot engage in a ground warfare or even an air campaign that will prove to be successful in defeating Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is also Syria, is also Iran, is also Russia. Therefore, it needs to be the employment of maximum force on the part of Israel in a first strike death blow to all of those targets. Now, I don't think anyone expects Israel to think that they can take out Russia. Russia has a standing army, not reserves, but standing army now of over 600,000 military troops. And then the reserves beyond that. A massive military force now. But the primary target is Iran. And he repeated that target 5 times in his address. Please consider these thoughts. As I like to say to our subscribers through anthonypatch.com, prudently prepare. God bless you all.